Welcome to F for Forensics, the podcast where we dive deep into the bits and bytes of the digital world. And, well, just like that. This is our final episode for the year 2025.
It's hard to believe the year's already wrapping up.
It really is. And we're ending on a big one. F is for the final piece, breaking a case wide open. But before we get started, I want to take a moment. Let's thank you, our listeners, for your support in joining us in this F series.
Absolutely. The engagement has been incredible.
It really has. We hope you have learned one thing or two about digital forensics. I mean, we are so grateful that we get to share our love for this field and, our insights with you all.
It's a privilege.
It is. And if you have not subscribed to our podcast, now is definitely the time to do so, as we have more exciting things coming up next year, and you really don't want to miss our future episode. We would love to hear your feedback or suggestions about future episodes or topics. Okay. Now, back to F is for the final piece. Breaking a case wide open. Let's unpack this. Where do we even begin? I guess let's start with the concept that makes an investigator's heart race. The final piece.
Right, the final piece. It's almost a mythical thing in this field.
Every investigator, regardless of the scale of the case, reaches that point where they are just staring at a mountain of data. You're completely swamped.
Oh, yeah. Spreadsheets with tens of thousands of logs, maybe data from multiple drives.
Exactly. Fragmented data, maybe conflicting user testimony, or even a system that someone's tried to aggressively scrub clean. You're overwhelmed. And then it happens. One artifact, just one single pivotal piece, pulls everything into crystal clear focus. And that singular artifact, that's what we call the final piece.
And what's so fascinating here, I think, is that the conventional idea of a smoking gun is, it's just wrong. People outside the field, they imagine something really dramatic.
Like an email confession.
Yeah.
Or a folder helpfully labeled stolen company secrets.
Exactly that. Or some huge network capture showing a massive file transfer. But the reality is, it's far more technical. It's subtle. And frankly, it's often quite mundane when you look at it in isolation.
Mundane?
Yeah. The final piece is almost always a tiny technical detail, a detail that only gains its crushing significance when you correlate it perfectly with every other piece of fragmented evidence you've painstakingly collected.
Okay, that distinction is absolutely key. It's the context, not the content, that gives it its power. So give us some examples. What do these mundane but pivotal artifacts actually look like?
Yeah.
What does that technical detail look like on the screen, and why is it so hard for a suspect to argue against?
Okay, let's start with time. Because time is, it's the universal link in any investigation. It ties everything together. Imagine you're trying to prove a file was accessed on a machine before it was uploaded to some external server. You might have timestamps from the file system and from the network server. But network time skew is a huge, huge issue.
The clocks are never perfectly in sync.
Never. So the pivotal artifact, the final piece of time, might be a single specific timestamp from the local machine's network time protocol log, the NTP log.
The NTP log. Why that log specifically? What makes it so trustworthy?
Because the NTP log proves the system's own clock was recently synchronized and, more importantly, verified against an external authoritative source. We're talking down to the microsecond sometimes.
Wow.
So if you can show that the local file access timestamp, let's say, the file name attribute in the NTFS master file table, if that aligns precisely with a critical NTP synchronization event just moments before, that completely eliminates any defense.
So they can't argue about time zone confusion or that the system clock was just wrong?
Exactly. They can't claim clock drift or user error. That alignment, down to the millisecond, makes that file system entry incontrovertible. It proves the sequence of events with a very high degree of certainty.
That precision is powerful. I get that. But what about malicious time manipulation or just system errors? What happens when the two machine clocks, the client and the server, they just disagree on that millisecond precision, which, they often do, right?
Right, and that's why we look for system involuntary actions the user doesn't directly control. So if the NTP log proves the client system's clock was correct at that moment, we then shift to artifacts that demonstrate intent.
Okay, like what?
Let's take a registry value change. A suspect might, vehemently deny installing some piece of remote access software. They'll claim they just ran a legitimate file they found online.
The classic defense. It must have been a virus. I didn't do it.
Exactly. But if your forensic image shows a specific registry key, maybe in the HKCU software, Microsoft Windows current version run key, or a subkey within the service control manager being modified, and that modification dictates the auto start and persistence of a suspicious executable,
then that little entry becomes definitive proof.
it's proof of persistence and, more importantly, user intention. That entry defines the how and it proves the system state. The registry is, it's the operating system's internal bookkeeper. It doesn't lie about what the system was told to do.
And the timing of that modification, the last right time of that specific registry key, would be seconds after the reported installation.
That linkage, that connection, transforms a mundane registry entry into a confession of intent.
Absolutely. Or think about system processes that aren't even file system modifications, like a previously unnoticed failed login attempt.
On its own, that's just noise, right? Security logs are full of failed logins. Full of them. It's just noise. But what if you isolate the single failed login that originated from the suspect's known physical IP, or their VPN IP address, and that failure occurred precisely 1 minute before the successful breach using the victim's stolen credentials?
So now it's not noise, it's a pattern.
It's a pattern.
Yeah.
That artifact suggests the suspect was already probing the defenses. They were testing the credentials they were about to use. It establishes a calculated intent, and it confirms the suspect knew the target system and the access method.
So the final piece isn't the destination itself, but it's the key piece of context that validates the whole journey. It's that one technical detail that links the abstract digital activity, a file modification, a network connection, to a definable, non-repudiable human action or a specific system state.
And this is where we have to stress the foundational requirement. You cannot find that single perfect piece if you haven't meticulously gathered, indexed, and cataloged every other piece of data. It's just not possible. It means applying all the foundational techniques we've talked about all year. Capturing memory before it vanishes, understanding file systems so you know where the logs even live, reconstructing comprehensive timelines. The final piece is simply the jewel that gets set perfectly within the crown of all that other foundational evidence. It just doesn't exist in a vacuum.
It's the moment the entire house of data you've built doesn't just collapse under legal scrutiny. It solidifies. It becomes objective fact.
Okay.
Let's see how that process unfolds. Let's really build a case here.
Let's do it.
We need to see this synergy between all these different forensic disciplines in action. Let's walk through a complex scenario, a hypothetical, where multiple artifacts stack up, leading us, inevitably to that crucial final piece.
Okay. We'll use a classic corporate case. A financial analyst reports unauthorized transfers from a client account. The investigation immediately targets, two things. Potential malware, or maybe more likely, an insider threat who's trying to cover their tracks.
And the firm needs speed and certainty. Financial losses, reputational damage. Those are immediate threats. The clock is ticking.
The clock is absolutely ticking. So, Step 1, foundational evidence forensic imaging. This is completely non-negotiable.
Right.
We have to acquire bit-for-bit copies, exact duplicates of the analyst's workstation and any relevant network infrastructure, server drives, you name it. We have to use write blockers, hash the original media and the forensic image, and document the chain of custody with extreme rigor.
Why spend so much time emphasizing the imaging process? Isn't that just standard procedure for anyone in the field?
It is, but the devil is always in the details of the acquisition. It's not just about getting the file system data. A complete defensible forensic image has to capture everything. Slack space, unallocated clusters, host-protected areas. All of it.
Because if you miss something.
If you fail to capture the entire physical disk, a good defense attorney can argue that the critical missing file, or the log you needed, could be hiding in that unallocated space you failed to copy. Integrity is the foundation. Every single technical finding you make later on rests upon it.
Okay, so we have that pristine hashed image. Now, this is where it gets really interesting for me. We move into establishing the chronology.
Yes. Step 2. Temporal clues super timeline analysis. This is where we take all the relevant timestamps from every possible source. NTFS metadata, the Windows registry, system event logs, especially the security and application logs, network traffic logs, firewall logs.
Pull from everywhere.
Everywhere. And you aggregate them into one single chronological sequence, the super timeline. And almost immediately, we discover the first critical anomaly, a login registered for the analyst's account at 2:17 a.m.
Which is way outside normal business hours.
Significantly. And that raises the first major flag. It suggests a deliberate attempt to operate covertly when no one else is watching.
But again, you always say correlation isn't causation. We've established the when, but we still need the mechanism. We need proof of actual malicious activity.
That leads us straight to step 3, volatile evidence RAM analysis. This is critical. Connecting this to the bigger picture, the investigators recognized this was a high-stakes case, so they captured the volatile memory, the RAM, before the system was ever powered down.
And that memory image turns out to be indispensable.
Absolutely. We run tools that scan the memory for known malicious signatures, for process injection, things like that, and we find it. We find evidence that a specific fileless credential stealing malware process was active in memory.
Fileless, so it's not an executable on the disk.
Exactly. It was running within the context of a legitimate process, something like svcoast.exe, precisely at 2:17 a.m.
Okay, let's unpack that. Why is memory capture so incredibly crucial when you're up against fileless malware?
Because fileless malware is designed to do just that, reside entirely in the system's RAM. Or it leverages built-in operating system tools, what we call living off the land. It never writes a physical executable to the disk that you can scan or easily identify after a reboot.
So the moment you power off the machine,
It's gone. Or even if you just wait too long, the evidence is gone. The fact that the process was active at 2:17 a.m. tells us the mechanism of credential theft was running at the exact same time as that suspicious login. It confirms the attacker was leveraging stolen credentials immediately after they got them.
okay, so we have the time, 2:17 a.m. We have the method, this memory-resident malware, but we still haven't established a physical link to the financial transfers. How do we prove that the data actually moved?
This leads to step 4, the physical connection flash storage forensics. While we're reviewing the device connection history in the system log specifically, USB device plug-and-play records investigators noted that a removable flash drive was connected and mounted shortly after 2:25 a.m.
So just a few minutes after the breach.
Just minutes. And forensics on that specific flash storage device, which they later retrieved, reveals fragments of the sensitive financial reports that were part of the unauthorized transfer.
Let's pause on that for a second. The flash storage. The user is going to claim they deleted those files immediately, or maybe they even formatted the USB drive. So how do we recover deleted files from a modern solid-state drive or a high-speed USB flash drive, especially if the OS issued a trim command?
This is where we have to go deep, down to the physical layer. The recovery hinges on understanding something called wear leveling artifacts.
Wear leveling.
Yeah. Unlike old magnetic spinning disks, modern flash storage has a finite number of write and erase cycles. To extend the life of the drive, the controller uses these really complex algorithms wear leveling to evenly distribute data write operations across all the available physical blocks. And that includes blocks that are logically marked as deleted or unallocated.
So even if the operating system logically deletes a file and issues a trim command, which is supposed to tell the drive to physically zero out that block, the actual physical erasure isn't immediate.
That's exactly right. The drive controller is busy managing all of its resources. So while the operating system might mark the blocks as available for new data, the controller often keeps the actual data intact in its physical reserve area until it absolutely needs those blocks for a new write operation.
And you can get to that reserve area.
By analyzing the physical memory chips on the USB drive using specialized tools, yes. We recovered enough header and footer fragments of the exfiltrated reports from this wear leveling reserve area to definitively confirm that those files had resided on that physical device even though they were logically purged. This technical resilience defeats simple deletion attempts every time.
That recovery method, based on the physical behavior of the drive itself, that is immensely powerful. So now we know the data was on a USB and the credentials were stolen. How did it leave the facility?
Now we get to step 5. Post-compromise activity browser artifacts. The narrative starts to build its external element. We pivot to user application artifacts. We examine the analyst's browser history, the cache, local storage, IndexedDB.
All the places a browser stores data.
All of them. And what we find are records showing the user accessed a private, unlisted cloud storage link. Maybe a throwaway account on a service like Mega or Dropbox. And this happens just minutes after the USB was disconnected.
So that establishes the specific exfiltration method and the target destination.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's recap. We have an incredibly strong circumstantial case now. There's a suspicious login at 2:17 a.m. We have malware present in memory. We have the stolen data recovered from a USB drive, which was then uploaded to a private cloud. But a defense attorney will still argue.
They will.
They'll say, this was all automated. The malware drove the USB transfer and the cloud upload. Our client is a victim of a sophisticated zero-day attack. We need that definitive, unarguable link to user interaction.
And that leads us perfectly to step 6, the definitive final piece. The conclusion is drawn through a single, small, often overlooked piece of user activity evidence, a jump list entry.
A jump list entry.
We find a specific jump list entry that confirms the exact moment the stolen report was opened locally by the user. It's the last action before the USB drive was ejected and the cloud upload occurred.
The humble jump list. Okay, we know this audience is technical, so let's frame this right. What exactly is the jump list, and why is its record so resilient and so difficult for an attacker to intentionally scrub?
So the jump list, which you'll find primarily in Windows 7 and later, is the operating system's involuntary metadata collection mechanism. It's designed for user convenience. When you right-click an icon on the taskbar, it presents a list of recently used files, folders, tasks associated with that application.
Right. I use it all the time.
And crucially, the system generates these entries automatically. It records details like the file path, the application used, and the precise last access time. And unlike a user's browser history, which you can clear with a single click, jump lists are administrative byproduct files. They have names like .automatic destinations-m's, and they sit deep within the user profile structure. Most users don't even know they exist.
So if the malware had simply copied the file to the USB and then uploaded it without the user ever opening it, the jump list would likely remain unchanged. The entry requires a specific kind of interaction.
Exactly. The presence of that jump list entry confirming the stolen report was opened or interacted with locally, it just eliminates the automated malware defense. Malware might copy a file, but it doesn't typically open it in Microsoft Excel or Adobe Reader and then close it, which is the exact sequence of events that triggers a jump list update.
So it links the user, the stolen file, and the time. It proves user involvement, interaction, and likely malicious intent. The user actually reviewed the stolen material just before they sent it out.
That's the synthesis. The scenario shows how timeline analysis gave us the 2:17 a.m. login, RAM forensics identified the in-memory malware, flash storage analysis recovered the deleted fragments via wear leveling, and browser forensics proved the exfiltration channel. They all pointed towards suspicion.
But it was that single, resilient, involuntary jump list entry that turned all that suspicion into incontrovertible proof of human intent and action.
Exactly.
That hypothetical case is it's a perfect model of a systematic investigation.
Yeah.
But in the real world, as we both know, the data is always messier. System clocks are wildly off. Suspects are much craftier.
Always.
So let's look at a couple of specific messy cases where these non-obvious artifacts became the ultimate final piece.
These are really the moments that define an investigator's career. It's that alignment moment where everything suddenly clicks into place, usually because you looked at a piece of data that everyone else just ignored.
Okay, let's start with one on the network side, where the challenge was just pure data volume.
Sure. We can talk about a case involving a persistent state-sponsored data loss where the investigator was just drowning in noise. I mean, hundreds of thousands of irrelevant security logs, application artifacts, legitimate internal file access records. The attackers had successfully used encrypted internal tunnels, and they had leveraged common protocols to hide their traffic in plain sight.
Classic investigation fatigue. You're trying to find one specific needle in a continent-sized haystack of needles.
That's a good way to put it. And the critical discovery, it wasn't a large, obvious file transfer at all. It was a single, tiny firewall log buried deep within the organization's perimeter defense system. And it showed an outbound connection to an unusual, unregistered external IP address on a non-standard port.
Like what?
Let's say port 54321. It's typically used for some niche database services, but in this case, it was being used for command and control communication, C2.
A 30-second blip on an obscure port. That sounds like something that should have been immediately flagged by any automated intrusion detection system.
It was missed. It was missed initially precisely because the connection was so short. It was only active for 30 seconds. And it used an obfuscated header protocol that made it look like benign, if a little unusual, internal communication when you viewed it through a high-level network monitor.
So it flew under the radar.
It did. But because the investigator was so meticulous in building that super timeline across all the systems, they correlated that 30-second outbound connection with an otherwise unexplainable lull in local CPU activity on the compromised host machine.
Ah, I see. The lull in CPU activity means the system was busy executing the command, probably compressing and encrypting the file before sending it out.
Exactly. That single firewall log was the only objective network-level evidence they had to confirm the breach path. It proved that a command and control connection had been established, and since no one in the organization could account for that IP, it confirmed the execution of the external exfiltration channel. It was the linchpin that proved all the scattered file access data on the host actually pointed to a single coordinated external event.
That raises an important question for our listeners. Why was the firewall log the key here, rather than the host system logs or the file system artifacts? I mean, if the system logs confirm the file access, why rely so heavily on that one network log?
Because file fragments and system processes can often be argued away. A defense can claim it was accidental or part of a legitimate system update, or even just a system malfunction. But the firewall log, especially from a verified controlled perimeter sensor, shows system-to-system communication that violates policy.
It's objective.
It proves the intent and execution of reaching out to a malicious or unauthorized external source. It provided non-repudiable proof of the exfiltration channel setup. It established the mechanism and the date of compromise in one single stroke, which is exactly what you need to withstand cross-examination.
That cross-discipline requirement is just undeniable then. You can't just be a host-based forensics expert. You have to understand network architecture, logging protocols, perimeter defense systems.
You absolutely have to. Okay, here's another case. This one focused purely on host data, we can call it. The ghost of malware past.
I like it.
In this investigation, the case relied not on the presence of the malware payload itself, but on the administrative byproduct of its removal. The primary suspect had thoroughly cleaned the system. They ran disk wipers, restored the system to a clean state, and claimed no malicious activity ever occurred on that machine.
The classic cover-up attempt. They focused on removing the payload. So what did they miss?
They forgot about the operating system's paper trail. The key evidence was a remnant of an uninstall log. Specifically, a single line within the Microsoft Software Installer logs, the MSI logs. It's a detailed record generated by the OS's own management components, and it indicated the malicious application used to exist on the system.
No way.
Yes. The log recorded the specific version, the installation path, and critically, the exact time the uninstallation process was initiated by the user.
Wait, so they left the bureaucratic digital receipt, but they scrubbed the entire installation. That is an incredible administrative oversight. The irony there must have been palpable.
It really speaks to the psychology of the perpetrator, right? They focus on the obvious threat, the executable file, but they fail to appreciate the vast automated bureaucracy of the operating system itself. That one single line in the uninstall log was vital. It established the timeline of compromise and the subsequent cover-up. It immediately shifted the whole investigative focus from, did this happen, to, okay, when exactly did you remove this malware and why were you scrubbing evidence?
What stands out to me here, for you the listener, is the lesson that investigators absolutely must look beyond the obvious evidence. It's about scrutinizing every single administrative byproduct of system behavior. So if the jump list confirms recent use, what other involuntary breadcrumbs can reinforce that kind of interaction?
Well, we talked about jump lists, but also think about shell bags. These are registry keys that record the view settings, the size, the location of every single folder window a user opens in Windows Explorer.
Oh.
So even if the user deletes the folder that contained the stolen data, the shell bag's entry for it persists. It can show that the user navigated to and opened that specific folder path at a specific time.
So in your ghost of malware past case, the uninstall log proved the malware existed, and the shell bags could have then proved the user navigated to the folder where the stolen data was temporarily staged before they got it off the system.
Exactly. And then you have LNK files, Windows shortcuts, and prefetch files. LNK files are automatically generated when a user opens a file. They record the path and volume information. Prefetch files record the first 10 seconds or so of an application's launch to help speed up future loading.
Right.
So if a suspect ran an executable that subsequently scrubbed the system, the prefetch file for that scrubber executable might still exist, and that provides incontrovertible proof that the user initiated the cleanup process themselves.
These final pieces are definitely not about magic or luck. It really is the cumulative result of systematic patient investigation.
It's the inevitable result of methodical investigation, relentless patience, and, crucially, a deep, almost intimate understanding of how various operating systems and applications behave and document themselves. If you know the specific function of the jump list, the purpose of wear leveling in SSDs, and the logging mechanism of a firewall, you know exactly where to look when the primary evidence appears to be gone. You're essentially exploiting the system's own design for efficiency to reconstruct the truth.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ability to break a case wide open, it comes directly from mastering the fundamentals and understanding their synergy. As that hypothetical case demonstrated, no single area of expertise was sufficient on its own.
That synthesis is the key takeaway for this whole year of deep dives, I think. We've walked through so many critical layers of knowledge, and today's conclusion proves exactly why mastering each piece matters so much. Let's not just list these areas, let's actually talk about the synergistic relationship between them.
Okay, let's start with the absolute foundation. File systems, NTFS, APFS, what have you, and timelines. They are inextricably linked. The master file table, the MFT in NTFS, is the primary repository of all that metadata. File names, creation, modification, access times.
So how does the MFT interact synergistically with a timeline? How do they help each other?
Well, the MFT tells you what existed when the system thought it was created or modified and where it was located. But the timeline validates that information against all your external sources.
I see.
If the MFT entry for a specific file shows a last access time of 2:17 a.m., but the application log or the network log shows related activity at 2:19 a.m., the timeline allows us to correlate that MFT timestamp with system time skew, which we can establish from the NTP logs we talked about earlier.
So without the timeline, the MFT data is just a data point.
It's just a data point. With the timeline, it becomes evidence of a sequence.
Okay. We also discussed firmware, things like UEFI and imaging. Why is the low-level firmware relevant to the high-level forensic image you take?
Because advanced attackers want persistence. And the deepest form of persistence you can get is below the operating system. If you take a forensic image, but you fail to check the UEFI logs or its configuration, the low-level controls that determine the whole boot process, you might miss that the attacker modified the secure boot settings or even flashed malicious code into the firmware itself.
So the image proves the state of the drive's data, but the firmware analysis proves the state of the machine environment that was running that data. They both have to align to show the machine was genuinely compromised from the ground up.
Exactly. Now, consider the relationship between memory forensics and user footprints, specifically those involuntary artifacts we mentioned, like jump lists and LNK files.
Right. In our scenario, the memory forensics proved the fileless malware existed, but it didn't prove the user actually interacted with the payload.
Correct. The memory dump shows the volatile code that was running, and that proves the mechanism of the compromise. But the jump list, or the LNK file, proves the human interaction with the resulting file. The memory says a credential stealer was active at 2:17 a.m. The jump list says the user opened the stolen report at 2:28 a.m. You bridge that gap between the automated attack and the user's action. They reinforce each other to create certainty.
We also spent some time this year reviewing forensic failures and flash storage analysis. That seems like an odd pairing on the surface.
Not at all, actually. Learning from failures often involves recognizing the limitations of previous technologies and the complexity of new ones. A major forensic failure today would be relying solely on logical file deletion methods when you're examining an SSD. Flash storage analysis, understanding trim, wear leveling, the intricacies of garbage collection is precisely the skill required to avoid that failure in the modern age. Flash storage techniques allow us to recover data that the attacker and even the operating system believes is permanently gone.
So, the ability to break a case isn't about finding one single truth. It's about synthesizing all these disparate technical truths to create one overarching singular narrative.
It's the ability to move seamlessly between the network layer to the volatile memory down to the firmware and then all the way back up to the user-level administrative files and hold all those threads in your hand at the same time. Digital forensics isn't about finding one artifact. It's the comprehensive analysis and combination of all of them.
And this synthesis is what truly separates a good investigator from a great one. It's the ability to tell a single, coherent, human story from thousands of scattered, dry, technical details. You are the translator for the bits and bytes. You turn system logs into legal testimony that proves intent and action. Let's reflect on the profound resilience of the evidence we've discussed. If you're the person under scrutiny, the evidence that betrays you is rarely the file you intended to hide. It's the automated receipt the system generated, the log entry it involuntarily created, or the wear leveling algorithm on the drive that kept your data alive long after you thought it was gone.
Yeah.
It's evidence that exists solely because modern systems strive for efficiency and redundancy, and the system just assumes the user's always being honest.
That's the real irony, isn't it? The best forensic evidence is almost always evidence that the system created for itself, not for the user. It's metadata, not content.
And with that incredibly powerful look at synthesis and the final piece, we conclude this year's Deep Dive series. Thank you so much for joining us on this year's journey into critical knowledge. It has been an incredible path of discovery, and we hope you feel significantly more equipped to navigate the complexities of digital evidence.
And we are certainly not stopping here. Next year, we're leveling up to meet the growing complexity of the digital landscape. We're planning bigger topics and deeper dives that will challenge and elevate your understanding of digital investigations in this rapidly changing world.
Oh yeah, we are talking about cloud forensics, which introduces enormous jurisdictional data acquisition and privacy challenges. I mean, the server farm might be 3 continents away. We'll explore AI-driven investigations, focusing not just on using AI tools, but understanding how attackers are leveraging generative AI to automate their social engineering and their exploit development processes.
Plus, we'll do detailed insider threat case breakdowns, which always require that exquisite combination of host, network, and human behavioral analysis. We'll focus on intent versus negligence. And of course, advanced mobile deep dives, navigating the complexities of modern encrypted operating systems and application sandboxing on both iOS and Android.
We're looking at specific techniques, new tool advancements.
And maybe even some guest investigators joining us to share their most challenging final piece moments.
It's going to be massive. The world of digital forensics is accelerating, and we are going to be right there in the deepest layers with you.
So here's a final provocative thought for you to carry into the new year. Every single action you take on a modern computing device, even the simple act of looking at a file, is not just recorded. It's cross-referenced by a dozen separate, involuntary, redundant system processes that are designed solely for operational efficiency. The true key to breaking a case is recognizing which piece of that mundane, redundant data is the most honest.
Stay curious, stay careful, and ensure you are subscribed so you don't miss the moment we return. Also, follow us on social media at F4 Forensics. We would love to hear your feedback or suggestions about future episodes or topics. We'll see you next year.
We wish you a wonderful new year in 2026.